Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to continue part two of negative exponents. Now again, we're going to use these properties from a previous lesson. So remember the properties: the product rule for exponents, the power rule, the power of a product, the power of a quotient, the quotient rule, the zero exponent rule, and the negative exponent rule. So, so these properties will all be used in this particular lesson. Okay, so let's look at this example. So we're going to simplify the following. All right, now these are going to have negative exponents. So remember, the idea is to write the answers with positive exponents only. All right, so you want the answers written with positive exponents. Okay, so number one, we have y to the negative third times z to the 6 raised to the negative 6 power. All right, so notice that this right here, we're going to use, first of all, we're going to use the power of a product. So that's this property right here, power of a product, which says that for each factor that's in the base, you're going to raise it to that power. So you see, you'll have a to the n, b to the n. All right, so the first thing you need to do, without doing this in your head, don't do this mentally, you could mess up. So just think about it. Just write it out. You have y to the negative third, and that's being raised to the negative 6 power. You also have z to the 6, and that's being raised to the negative 6 power. All right, so you just used the power of a product. So going from here to here is the power of a product. Now, what you have now is you have y to the negative third, and that's raised to the negative 6 power. So you're going to use here the power rule. So remember, the power rule says that when you have a base raised to power, then all you need to do is just multiply the powers. So you just say m times n. So basically you're going to say, and I remember we're going to use a power rule now. So you're going to say y to the negative third raised to negative 6 is the same thing as saying negative 3 times negative 6, which is 18. So you can get y to the 18th power times, and this is going to be z, again, use a power rule. Power raised to power, you multiply, so that's negative 36. Okay, so that's where I'm at. All right, now remember, that's not the answer, because you want to, in terms of exponents, you want your exponents to be positive. This is negative. So you have to rewrite this. So we're going to use the negative exponent property. That says that if you have a to the negative n, then that's the same thing as saying 1 over a to the n. So you want to make this positive. So remember, in a previous lesson, if the if the exponent is negative in the numerator, you're just going to rewrite it in the denominator. And if the exponent is negative in the denominator, you're going to rewrite it, that factor, that base raised to that power, in the numerator, and you're going to make the exponents positive. Okay, so what that means is this. So technically, if you want to follow that step right here that says that a to negative n is 1 over a to the n, you could say this. You could say equal, I'm going to write it right here. You could say that's going to be y to the 18th times, and according to this property, that's z to the negative 36. It's the same thing as saying 1 over z to the 36. And the issue is that you may not remember how to multiply fractions from a previous course. If that's the case, you may then want to rewrite this as y to the 18th over 1. Now, you don't want to write your answer like this. You want the answer written as one fraction. So don't leave it as the product of two fractions. You have to write it as one fraction. So y to the 18th times 1 is y to the 18th, and 1 times z to the 36 is z to the 36. Okay? Now, so that's one way. The other way is going back to this, is knowing that you want to write it as one fraction. So you can put the numerator and the denominator. The numerator, anything that's positive stays where it is. Anything that's negative, you're gonna move either to the numerator or the denominator. So since z to the negative 36, that's in the numerator, I'm going to put in the denominator. So that's z to the 36, and y to the 18 stays in the numerator. So there's your answer. Okay, so all my exponents are positive. And again, notice the properties I use along the way. Okay, number 2, suppose you had this. Suppose you had 2x cubed raised to the 4th power times x divided by x to the 7th. Okay, so again, now be a little bit careful. If you notice that the exponent 4, you're raising all of this to the 4th power. So you need to first of all deal with the power of a product first before you do anything else, before you use any other property. You need to deal with this first. So this becomes 2 to the 4th times x cubed to the 4th times x divided by x to the 7th. So all I did was rewrite this using the power of a product, and just rewrite everything else. Now I'm going to use in this case, I'm going to use the power rule, and here I'm just going to use the definition of 2 to the 4th. So the definition of 2 to the 4th means 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16. And here, I'm going to use the power rule, so it'll be x to the 12th times x divided by x to the 7th. So now I'm going to use the product rule here. So when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. 12 plus 1 is 13. So I get 16 x to the 13th power divided by x to the 7th. Okay? Now, so again, I'm going to use the product rule here. Okay, so going from here to here. All right, now notice I'm dividing like bases. So now I'm going to use the quotient rule. And so remember the quotient rule right here says that when you divide like bases, you subtract exponents. So it's the base, which is a here, raised to the exponent that's in the numerator, subtract the exponent that's in the denominator. And so here I'm going to get 16 times x to the 13 minus 7. And 13 minus 7 is, what's that, 6. So you get 16x to the 6th power. Now notice the exponent's positive, so I don't have to use, remember in this case I had to use the negative exponent property. Here I don't, so I'm done. That's the answer. All right, for 3, you have 4 to the negative 1 times x to the negative 3rd times y divided by 4 to the negative 3rd x squared y to negative 6. All right. Now, the way I would approach this is if you look at these, I have a base of 4 in the numerator and a base of 4 in the denominator. Same thing with the x's, same thing with the y's. So I am going to make sure, okay, so that's y to the 1st right here. All right, so I'm going to use the quotient rule right away. So going from here to here, I'm going to use the quotient rule. So you divide like bases, subtract exponents. So that's going to be 4. And remember, though, it's always the exponent in the numerator, subtract the exponents in the denominator. So that's 4 to the negative 1, subtract a negative 3, times x to the negative 3, subtract a 2, times y to the 1st power, subtract a negative 6. So that's what we have. So negative 1, subtract, notice the subtraction symbol, a negative 3, subtract a positive 2, a positive 1, remember that's understood to be a 1 right here, a positive 1, subtract a negative 6. Alright, now you can either use your calculator, but it's a really good idea to understand from a previous course how to deal with subtraction. So remember, subtraction means to add the opposite. So So this really becomes, I'm going to just show you what that means. This really becomes negative 1 subtraction. You're going to change it to addition, and you're going to add the opposite of negative 3. The opposite of negative 3 is 3. So then that would become in your answer, negative 1 plus 3 is a positive 2. Okay, over here, negative 3. So it become, remember subtraction, change the subtraction to addition. So there'll be negative 3 plus the opposite of 2, which is a negative 2. And so that becomes x to the negative 5th power. Negative 3 plus negative 2 is negative 5. And over here, that becomes 1. And remember, it's subtraction, change it to addition. So you can add the opposite. So the opposite of negative 6 is a positive 6. And so that becomes y to the 7th power. Okay, so that's where we're at. Now, again, you really should understand those rules from previous course. But if you're pressed for trying to go back to a previous course, understand this and use your calculator. Punching it as you see it, negative 1 subtract the negative 3, you should get 2. Alright, now remember, you want to simplify, you don't want any negative exponents, so the only thing that has a negative exponent is this base x. Everything else stays where it is, so let's just think about writing it as one fraction. So y squared is going to stay in the numerator. Oops, I'm sorry, that's a 4. Excuse me. So that's 4, that's 4, that's 4. So 4 squared is 16. So make sure you rewrite 4 squared. Don't leave it as 4 squared, because you'll know that 4 squared is 16. You got to rewrite it as 16 times y to the 7th divided by, and then you want to make this exponent negative. It's negative in the numerator. I'm sorry, you make this exponent positive. It's negative in the numerator, so you're going to put in the denominator. And there's your answer. All right, number 4. You have negative 2 x to the 3rd power y divided by x y to the negative 1, and all that's being raised to the 3rd power. Okay, oops, right here. So negative 2x to the 3rd power y divided by x y to negative 1, and all that's being raised to the 3rd power. Alright, so what I would do is use the power of a quotient first. Power of a quotient. So that means, remember, power of a quotient means that when you have a quotient and you're raising it to a power, then take the numerator, whatever's in the numerator, raise it at power. Whatever's in the denominator, raise it at power. So what it means is this. My numerator is this, so I'm going to say negative 2 x to the 3rd y, all that's raised to the 3rd power, divided by, and then the denominator is this, and that's also being raised to the 3rd. All right, so that's going from here to here is the power of a quotient. All right, and now going from here to here, I'm going to now use the power of a product. So that's going to become negative 2 to the 3rd power, x cubed to the 3rd power, y to the 3rd power. So every factor that's in here, you're going to raise to the 3rd power, divided by, and then over here in the denominator will be x to the 3rd power, and then y negative 1 to the 3rd power. So I use the power of a product in this case. Alright, and now I'm just going to go ahead and use the power rule, and then here I'm just going to use the definition. So first of all, negative 2 to the 3rd power means negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, which is negative 8. X to the 3rd raised to the 3rd, that's a power rule. So that'll be x to the 3 times 3 is 9. Y to the 3rd, remember that's supposed to be a 1 right here, 1 times 3 is 3. Divided by x, 1 times 3 is 3. So x to the 3rd, and then here, negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. Right, so going from here to here, I use the power rule. Alright, and now I'm going to use the quotient rule. X to the 9 divided by x. I'm dividing like bases. So I'm going to get negative 8, x to the 9th minus 3, y to the 3rd power minus a negative 3. So again, going from here to here, I'm using the quotient rule. And then I'm just going to simplify. So 9 subtract 3, that's easy, that's just 6. 3 subtract a negative 3, remember that means 3 plus 3, which is 6. No negative exponents, you're done. There's your answer. So that was number 4. Alright, number 5, let's suppose we had, let's see, let's suppose we had this. Okay, alright, suppose we had 3x squared y to the negative 1 raised to the negative 4th power divided by x squared y to negative 2 raised to the negative 2. Alright, suppose we had that. Okay, so again, I'm going to use the first of all, if you look at this, I have something in the parentheses, and all that's being raised to negative 4th power. So I'm going to use the power of a product. Same thing here. So I'm going to have 3 to the negative 4th power times x squared to the negative 4th power times y to negative 1 to the negative 4th power divided by x squared to the negative 2nd power y to negative 2nd divided raised to the negative 2nd power. So all I'm doing in the numerator and denominator is using the power of a product. Alright, and now I'm going to just use the definition. I'm going to wait for this one right here, 3 to the negative 4th, because we know by what definition what 3 to the 4th means. 3 to the 4th means 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. But 3 to the negative 4th is not defined that way. So we got to rewrite this one later. So I'm going to leave this one alone for right now. So that's just going to be 3 to the negative 4th, just like it is. All right. Now here, x to the negative 2nd raised to the negative 4th is x to the negative 8. And then this one's going to be y to negative 1 raised to the negative 4th. Negative 1 times negative 4 is 4. Divided by x to the 2nd raised to the negative 2nd is x to the negative 4th. Remember, they're using a power rule, so you multiply the powers. And then that's going to be negative 2 times the negative 2, which is a positive 4. Alright, now over here, don't make the mistake and say that's a negative 3 to the 4th. First of all, you're not saying 3 times negative 4, so that's not negative 12. And also, if you were to say, well, first of all, it's 3 to the 4th, well, 3 to the 4th is 81, but it's not negative 81. So don't think that you say 3 to the 4th is 81 and then make it negative. That's not what that means. Okay? Alright. So, what I'm going to do right now is this. I'm going to leave 3 to the negative 4th alone for right now. Alright, so just leave it alone for right now. Let's deal with it later. Now I'm going to use a quotient rule. So when divide like basis and subtract exponents. So there'll be x to the negative 8, subtract a negative 4. Y to the 4th, subtract 4. Okay? Alright, so here I get 3 to the negative 4th. X to the, now remember, negative 8 subtract a negative 4. Negative 8 subtract a negative 4. Remember previous course, you changed this to addition. So you're going to add the opposite. So it's negative 8 plus a, and the opposite of a negative 4 is a positive 4. And a negative 8 and a positive 4 is a negative 4. So I get x to the negative 4. And then 4 minus 4 here is 0, so I get y to the 0. Okay? Alright, so, and I'll also remember that the 0 exponent rule, y to the 0, as long as, and we're assuming that the variables represent positive numbers. So y to the 0 is 1. All right, so we're using the 0 exponent. All right, so a to the 0 is 1. As long, remember, this is true for any non-zero base. So as long as a is not 0, then a to the 0 is 1. Okay, so that's 1. So then what I have is this. So let's think about that, rewriting this with positive exponents. Okay, so in terms of a fraction, I'm going to rewrite this as as 3 to the negative fourth with a positive exponent, so it's going to go in the denominator. And then here, remember this is all multiplication. So here, the exponent's negative, I'm going to also put it in the denominator. And this is just 1, I'm going to leave it up here in the numerator. So I'm going to get 1 over, now 3 to the fourth, let's figure that out. That's 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 81. And then x to the fourth. And so that's your answer there. Okay? Alright, and then let's look at, let's see. Alright, let's look at number 6. Okay, so suppose you had 2x to the negative second y squared raised to the negative third power divided by 8. Let's make it 16. 16, that's a 16. X to the third power, y to the negative third power. Okay, so just as before, you have a power raised to a power of a product. Now be a little bit careful, don't reduce it to the 16. So that is a common error. The only time you could reduce it to 16 is if this exponent is a 1, and it's not, it's a negative 3. So you can't say 2 to 2 is 1, 2 to 16 is 8, because this 2 is being raised to the negative third power. It is not being raised to the first power. Okay, so you got to be careful. So the first thing you need to do before you reduce anything or before you even use a quotient rule, you should always deal with this outer exponent. So I am taking the power of a product. So do that first. So that's going to be 2 to the negative third power times x to the negative second raised to the negative third power times y squared raised to the negative third power divided by 16 x cubed y to the negative third. So here I'm just rewriting because I don't have these factors raised to any power, so just rewrite it. Okay, now let's just see, you also have another situation where you have 2 raised to the negative third power. So that's not negative 8, that's not negative 6, so let's leave it alone for right now. Let's think about it in a little while. Okay, but here I'm going to use the power rule, so that's going to be 2 to the negative third, x to the 6th power, negative 2 times negative 3 is 6, y to the negative 6th power, divided by 16, x cubed, y to the negative third. Alright, now, you see this 16? There are a couple ways you can deal with this. First of all, let's think of the x's. So here with the x's and the y's, I can use the quotient rule. And here, I can also use the quotient rule because 16 is 2 to the 4th power. So I can do that if I wanted to. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and well, let's just go ahead and leave it like that for right now. So I have 2 to the negative third times x to the 6 subtract 3. Your dividing like basis to subtract exponents. Y to negative 6 subtract a negative 3. And all that's being divided by 16, just like this, if you need to. Okay? And so I get 2 to the negative third times x to the third power, and then negative 6 subtract a negative 3 is negative 6 plus 3, which is a negative 3. So that's y to the negative third divided by 16. Alright, now let's write it as one fraction. Okay, one fraction. Alright, so anything with a negative exponent, I'm going to move. So you see this 2 to the negative third? It's in the numerator, put it in the denominator. See this y to the negative third? It's in the numerator, put it in the denominator. The 16 stays where it is, the x cubed stays where it is. So that means that for right now, x cubed is going to be in the numerator, and 2 to the negative third is going to be in the denominator, along with that 16, so times 16, and then times y negative third, I need to bring it to the denominator. And so 2 to the third power is 8. We get x cubed, so that'll be 8. This right here is 8, so 8 times 16 8 times 16 is 128. So you got 128 y cubed. And so there's your answer. Okay, so that is part 2 of negative exponents. And so remember, you're going to use these properties, all these properties you've learned. Notice we used all of these properties at some point in this lesson. So go back over this lesson and make sure you understand how to use these properties when you have negative exponents.